My name is Lena. I was 28. For 2 decades, I believed my family was broken but loved me, just in their own twisted way, convincing myself their controlling nature was protection. It was my grandmother's 80th birthday dinner, in the grand, suffocating dining room of our ancestral home. My uncle, usually a silent observer, accidentally knocked over a dusty old photo frame, revealing a hidden loose floorboard. That single, clumsy act shattered the fragile piece of my entire existence. What was hidden beneath? Not old letters, but a false bottom, a hidden compartment holding stacks of forged documents, my father's real will, and a meticulously kept journal detailing decades of systematic financial manipulation. In less than an hour, the carefully constructed facade of my family's legacy crumbled into a pile of lies. My mother, still at the head of the table, was calmly wiping a smudge off her heirloom silverware, utterly oblivious that her world was about to ignite. Before we get into this, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. My name is Jenna Parker. I was 34 years old when my mother turned my birthday dinner into a public execution. Not with a knife, not with blood, with a silver pen, a sealed folder, and one sentence that showed me exactly how much I was worth to the people sitting around that table. Sign it, Jenna. Tonight. I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. I sat in my car outside the gates for exactly 7 minutes. I know because I watched the dashboard clock change from 9:42 to 9:49 while the house behind me glowed like nothing had happened. Through the windows, I could still see shapes moving around the dining room. People were probably whispering, "Tomorrow." I read that sentence 3 times. Then I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the timing felt almost cruel. My mother had just thrown me out of a house where every wall reminded me I was unwanted. The next morning, I would own an island castle outright, paid in full, no mortgage, no family trust controlled by her, no permission needed. That night, I did not drive to a hotel. That morning, for the first time, it sounded like ownership. The castle sat on a black rock island 12 minutes by boat from the mainland with a private dock, a weather station, 6 guest cottages, a lighthouse, a boathouse, underground storage tunnels, and a main residence built from granite so dark it looked blue under storm clouds. It was absurd. It was beautiful. It was not a fantasy purchase, made out of heartbreak. Every room gave me an idea. Every locked cabinet made me wonder what I had been too afraid to open in my own life. But peace did not arrive cleanly. It came in fragments between threats. My mother began sending messages through relatives, each one disguised as concern. The third visit was last winter, 3 weeks before I received a mysterious anonymous tip that Ravenwick Island might be undervalued. My stomach turned cold. I had thought I had found the island. Now I wondered if the island had been placed in my path. Was I the buyer, or had someone been guiding me toward a battlefield my father prepared years before I understood the war? I called Nora Whitfield, the granddaughter of the attorney who had written the letter and now a partner at his old firm. She answered on the second ring. When I told her my name, she went silent for several seconds. Then she said, "I wondered when you would call." Those 5 words opened a door I could never close again. Nora flew to Maine the next morning with 2 bankers and a forensic accountant. She had made my emotions the problem so no one would examine her actions. But what do you call a daughter who stops asking for love and starts asking for evidence? Dangerous. That was what I became. Before we left the dining room, Nora placed one folder apart from the rest. I had not recorded it on purpose. My phone had been on the table because I was expecting a call from the closing attorney and my voice memo app had been open from a work note earlier that day. It captured everything. Her demand, her refusal to let me read the contract, her scream, the family silence, the sound of my chair sliding back as I left. Nora listened once, removed her glasses, and said, "This changes the temperature." No one moved. No one coughed. No one rescued her from the sound of herself. My brother stared at the table. My aunt covered her mouth, just enough for everyone to see the panic underneath. "You ungrateful little girl," she whispered. But the microphone at the conference table caught it. The room heard every word. And that was the moment the power shifted. For years, I accepted that grief as a closed door. Now, the door had a shadow under it. I asked Nora if we could prove my mother had anything to do with his death. She was careful. Not from this. My aunt resigned from every board she sat on. Cousins who once called me unstable started sending apologies that sounded like legal drafts. I did not answer most of them. The strangest thing was not their betrayal. It was how quickly they wanted forgiveness once loyalty became expensive. I missed a woman who had never existed except in my hope. That was the final grief, and maybe the hardest one. Because when someone cruel finally falls, you still have to live with the empty space where love should have been. My brother came to the island once after everything settled. He looked older, smaller, less certain that charm could save him. Family is not proven by blood, last names, holiday photos, or the people who clap when someone powerful humiliates you. Family is proven by protection, by truth, by the courage to stand beside you when silence would be easier. My mother screamed, "Get out," because she thought exile was punishment. She never imagined it would become my inheritance. The room went quiet so fast I could hear the ice crack inside someone's glass. I looked at the document in front of me. It was thick, legal, and already marked with little yellow tabs where my signature was supposed to go. I hadn't been allowed to read it. I hadn't been allowed to ask questions. Maybe someone was laughing nervously. Maybe someone was already cleaning the cake off the table, erasing me like a stain. The old Jenna would have driven to a hotel and replayed every insult until sunrise. The old Jenna would have written a long message asking why my own mother hated me so much. But the woman sitting in that car had spent years preparing for one night. I drove to a small office I kept near the harbor, unlocked a filing cabinet, and pulled out the copies I had made months before. Old company records, my father's death certificate, my mother's financial disclosures, and a sealed envelope my late father's former assistant had mailed me with a note that said, "Open this only when your mother asks you to sign something." I had been too afraid to open it before. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a single flash drive, a photograph of my father holding me as a child, and a handwritten line I recognized from old birthday cards. "Jenna, if she tries to take your name, your work, or your inheritance, do not negotiate." It was a fortress, a business asset, a retreat center waiting to happen, and most importantly, a legal address no one in my family controlled. When I stepped onto the dock, the estate manager was waiting for me. His name was Elias Grant, 61, former Coast Guard, quiet eyes, heavy wool coat, and the kind of posture that made him look as if even storms asked his permission before crossing the water. He handed me the keys with both hands. "Welcome home, Miss Parker. You're being impulsive. You can't manage a property like that. Everyone is worried about your mental state." Those phrases were not random. They were legal language. Elias helped me search the archive room. Behind old ledgers, rusted keys, cracked leather trunks, and mold-smelling shipping maps, we found a locked metal document case marked with the name of the original shipping family. The key was taped under a drawer, almost too obvious, as if someone wanted it found by the right person, but missed by anyone in a hurry. My mother was always in a hurry when something didn't belong to her. Inside were copies of meeting notes, wire records, photographs, and a letter addressed to my father. We spread the documents across the castle's long dining table. It looked like a war room, because it was one. Nora explained that my father's trust had been buried under layers of protective clauses after he died suddenly in a boating accident. My mother had tried to challenge it privately, failed, then spent years making sure I never learned enough to trigger it. The contract at my birthday dinner was her final shortcut. "There's something else," she said. "Your father's boating accident file was requested twice after his death. Once by the insurance company, once by your mother's private attorney." The air left my lungs. I did not ask the question out loud because I already knew everyone in the room was thinking it. But I did not want only legal victory. I wanted truth with witnesses. So, we invited the foundation board, 2 journalists specializing in nonprofit fraud, and several family members to a private clarification meeting at a hotel conference room in Boston. The invitation was written politely enough that my mother could not refuse without looking guilty. My mother arrived in winter white, pearls at her throat, smiling like a woman attending a charity luncheon. She expected a weakened daughter. My mother looked at me with hatred so pure it almost felt honest. "You recorded your own family?" she said. I looked at her and asked the first question that mattered. "Why were you afraid of me reading the contract?" Not because I shouted louder, not because I insulted her back, but because I had learned the one thing controlling people fear most, a calm victim with receipts. My family began to understand what I had understood in the rain at Ravenwick. My mother had not been protecting the family from me. She had been protecting herself from the truth. By sunset, the story was already moving faster than my mother could control. Not yet. But we can prove she profited from the aftermath and concealed material estate assets. That had to be enough for now. Revenge stories make people think satisfaction comes from shouting in someone's face. It doesn't. 6 months after my mother screamed, "Get out!" I stood in the renovated lighthouse on Ravenwick Island and watched 24 women arrive by ferry for the first retreat hosted by the Parker Independent Recovery Fund. I had named it Parker not for my mother, not even entirely for my father, but for the version of myself who had survived that name long enough to redefine it. The fund offered legal education, financial literacy workshops, emergency planning, and quiet rooms where women could say out loud what their families had trained them to hide. Some had been controlled by spouses, some by parents, some by adult children who treated inheritance like a weapon. None of them needed a castle to be free. He apologized without excuses this time. I didn't hug him. I didn't slam the door either. I told him forgiveness was not a switch I could flip to make him comfortable. It was a road, and I had not decided whether he was allowed to walk it with me. I was just expected to obey, smile, and pretend this was love. "What is it?" I asked. My mother's face didn't move, but her voice dropped low enough to cut. "It protects the family." She had never wanted to believe would come. I was not broke. I was not helpless. And I was not the confused daughter they thought they could corner. For 11 years, I had worked as a forensic maritime appraiser. Run the numbers, then run the truth. That was the first time I understood my mother hadn't kicked me out because I was worthless. She kicked me out because I was the last thing standing between her and everything she had stolen. The next morning, I wore the same black dress from my birthday dinner to the closing. I didn't change because I wanted to remember exactly who they thought they had thrown away. No one had ever said those words to me without making them sound like a condition. I almost answered, but my phone rang, my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then came my older brother, then my cousin, then a private number. By noon, I had 32 missed calls, 11 voicemails, and 1 text from my mother. She was building a story that I was unstable. By the 3rd night, one cousin sent me a voice message saying my mother was considering options because my behavior had become alarming. I listened to it twice, then forwarded it to my attorney's temporary inbox without replying. That was when I realized the document she had tried to force me to sign had probably given her authority over my assets, maybe even my medical decisions, maybe even my company proceeds. The question that kept me awake was not why she wanted control. The letter was from a man named Charles Whitfield, an estate attorney who had represented several old New England families. It said my father had hired him to create an independent trust for me, separate from my mother, funded through maritime investments my father had made before his death. The trust was designed to release in stages. Education at 21, seed capital at 25, full access at 35, or earlier if my mother attempted to claim legal control over me. I was 34, 1 year away. If I had signed, she could have argued I had voluntarily assigned my financial authority to her family office. She would not have needed to steal my company payout. I would have handed it to her. That realization did not make me cry. It made me very still. How far had my mother gone to keep control? And how much of my life had been built on a lie she expected me to inherit silently? My mother made her first official move 6 days after she kicked me out. The petition arrived by courier at Ravenwick Island in a cream envelope with my full name typed in capital letters. Even the paper looked expensive enough to insult me. She found projector screens, binders, attorneys, auditors, and me standing at the front of the room in a navy suit. For the first time in my life, I did not feel small beside her. I did not feel like her disappointing child. I felt like a witness called by the truth. This meeting is being recorded. She didn't answer, so I clicked to the next slide. Wire transfers, forged minutes. Foundation money routed through fake consulting agreements, altered beneficiary forms, a private investigator's invoice with my name on it. The journalist in the back leaned forward. One journalist called it a private family dispute with public financial consequences. The second called it what it was, a charity fraud scandal tied to an attempted financial control petition against an adult daughter. The foundation board suspended my mother pending investigation within 24 hours. 2 directors resigned before they could be questioned. My brother, who had watched me get thrown out without saying a word, called me from a blocked number and said, "Jenna, I didn't know." I wanted to believe him. Real satisfaction is watching the person who built a throne out of lies discover that every document has a date, every wire has a destination, and every witness eventually gets tired of being used. My mother lost her board seat. Then her social club membership was suspended. Then the hospital wing she had tried to name after herself paused the dedication ceremony. Then banks froze several accounts tied to the disputed entities. But for one weekend, they got to stand inside one and be reminded that locked doors can open. Elias ran the island operations with the calm precision of a ship captain. Nora stayed on as counsel for the fund. The cottages filled with teachers, nurses, artists, accountants, and mothers who had forgotten they were allowed to want anything for themselves. On the first evening, I told them a softened version of my story. He nodded. For once he accepted an answer that did not serve him, that felt like progress. On my 35th birthday, I opened the final portion of my father's trust. Nora handed me the documents in the same castle dining room where we had once spread out proof of my mother's crimes. That was when I knew it didn't protect me. I reached for the first page, but she slapped her palm over it. Not hard enough to bruise, just hard enough to humiliate me in front of everyone. "You have always been difficult," she said. "Always ungrateful. Always convinced you were smarter than the rest of us. The kind of specialist insurance companies called when yachts vanished, cargo ships burned, docks collapsed, and billionaires lied about what their assets were worth. I knew how to trace ownership through shell companies. I knew how to read contracts written to trap people. And 3 months earlier, I had sold my minority stake in a marine risk software company I had helped build quietly under a different holding name. My family thought I had a strange little consulting job. That dress still carried the faint smell of candle smoke, expensive perfume, and humiliation. Every time I looked down at the sleeves, I remembered my mother's finger pointing toward the door. Every time I felt the fabric against my skin, I heard the silence of the people who had watched me leave. But instead of making me weak, it sharpened me. At 8:17, I walked into a glass conference room overlooking the harbor in Portland, Maine. "You embarrassed me last night. Come home before this becomes worse. Not are you safe. Not I'm sorry. Not even where are you?" It was how long she had been planning it. On the 4th night, as rain battered the castle windows, Elias knocked on the library door and handed me a maintenance binder from the previous owners. "Found something behind a false panel in the archive room," he said. Inside the binder was a property map, but tucked behind it was a copy of an old visitor log. One name appeared 3 times over 7 years. Unless last night counted as an attempt. My breath caught so hard it hurt. My father had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to build a legal shield for a daughter who didn't even know she needed one. There's a kind of anger that screams, and there is a kind that becomes math. Mine became math. We calculated missing funds. We matched dates. We reviewed board signatures. Inside, her attorneys claimed I was suffering from acute emotional instability, that my purchase of an island estate proved reckless judgment, and that my family was seeking temporary oversight of my finances for my protection. I read the sentence twice and smiled so calmly that Nora looked concerned. "She thinks the island makes you look irrational," Nora said. "Then we'll make the island make sense," I answered. That afternoon, we released nothing publicly. Nora announced, My mother's smile tightened. Jenna, this is unnecessary. She said, family matters should remain private. There it was, the sentence people use when privacy means protection for the guilty. I clicked the remote. The first slide showed the document she had tried to make me sign. A board member whispered, Margaret, what is this? My mother stood so abruptly her chair struck the wall. These are stolen documents, she snapped. Nora replied, no, they are estate records belonging to trusts and entities. Part of me still remembered him teaching me how to ride a bike. How he ran beside me down the driveway shouting, don't look down. But another part of me remembered his eyes at the birthday table lowered while our mother pointed at the door. You didn't know because not knowing was comfortable, I said and hung up. The court hearing on my mother's petition became her first public humiliation. Her attorneys argued that my purchase was irrational. The family house in Newport, the same house she had ordered me out of, became collateral in a civil recovery action. She called me once after that. I answered because I wanted to hear what a woman like her sounded like without an audience. You are destroying this family, she said. I stood in the Ravenwick library looking at my father's photograph on the desk. Not because I wanted pity, because silence is where manipulation grows teeth. I told them that the night I was kicked out, my family thought humiliation would shrink me. Instead, it clarified me. I told them that money did not save me by itself. Evidence saved me. There was also one last letter from him. It was short. Jenna, I cannot choose your life for you. I can only leave you tools. Trust your mind. I looked around the table, waiting for one person to speak up. Nobody did. Then she stood, pointed toward the front door, and screamed, get out. The whole family backed her. No one blinked. No one followed me. They had no idea that my payout had cleared into escrow 2 days before my birthday. They also had no idea that the document my mother wanted me to sign was not a birthday surprise. It was a financial ambush. At 9:52, my phone buzzed. It was an email from the closing attorney for Ravenwick Island Estate, a private island off the coast of Maine with a stone castle built by a shipping magnate in the 1920s. The seller's attorney looked surprised when I gave my name. People always expected someone older, colder, probably male. When $87 million was on the table, they didn't expect a woman with no entourage, no husband beside her, no family representative, and no nervous explanation for why she was there. I placed my identification on the table, sat down, and signed each page slowly, not dramatically, not shaking, just carefully, the way I had learned to sign reports that could decide whether a company survived or collapsed. At 8:46, the final wire confirmation came through. Come home before this becomes worse. I showed Elias the message because I needed one witness to prove I wasn't imagining the cruelty. He read it once, then handed the phone back. People who use home as a leash hate it when you learn how to unlock doors. That was the first time I trusted him. My mother's. She had been to Ravenwick Island before, long before I bought it, long before I knew it existed. And suddenly, my safe place didn't feel random anymore. It felt like a trap someone had failed to close before I stepped inside. I stared at my mother's signature in the visitor log until the ink seemed to move. Enough to create a trap for the woman who spent years pretending to be the grieving widow. In the document case, we found something worse. Copies of forged board minutes from my father's company, insurance settlement transfers, altered beneficiary paperwork, and handwritten notes linking my mother to a pattern of asset stripping after his death. She hadn't just been controlling, she had been stealing from the estate, from the foundation, possibly from me. We compared old scanned documents against originals kept in the island archive. We found charitable donations that had gone out under children's hospital names and returned through consulting invoices to companies tied to my mother's closest allies. We found payments marked as legacy preservation that had nothing to do with preserving anything except her lifestyle. We found a private investigator's invoice from 8 years ago, with my name on it. My mother had not only watched my money, she had watched me. We did not rant. We did not post vague quotes online. We did not give my mother the satisfaction of watching me defend myself emotionally. We built a response so precise it could bleed. Nora filed proof that the estate purchase had been planned weeks before the birthday dinner, supported by inspection reports, valuation memos, bank confirmations, tax planning documents, projected operating revenue, and investment notes, showing the island could become a profitable retreat and preservation property. The second showed the clause giving her family office emergency authority over my assets. The third showed my company payout date. A murmur moved through the room. My older brother shifted in his chair. My aunt's face drained of color. Your office had no authority to alter. Then the final slide appeared. Ravenwick Island visitor logs with my mother's signature. You knew about my father's trust, I said. My voice did not shake. Nora responded with valuation reports showing the island estate was underpriced by nearly 12% because of liquidity pressure on the seller and that my planned conversion of the cottages into a high-end retreat center would generate significant income. Then Nora played the birthday audio. The judge's face hardened before the recording ended. My mother sat perfectly still, but I saw her fingers digging into her palm. When Nora introduced the forged documents, the judge did not rule on criminal matters, but she did deny my mother's petition immediately and referred several exhibits for review by the Attorney General's office. No, I said, I'm documenting who already did. She breathed hard into the phone. You think that island makes you untouchable? No, I said, the truth does. For once, she had no comeback. Preparation saved me. One honest attorney, one steady witness, one unopened envelope, and one decision not to crawl back saved me. My mother's case continued for months. She eventually pleaded guilty to several financial crimes to avoid a longer trial. She lost the Newport house, most of her personal fortune, and the public identity she had polished for 30 years. Protect your name. Build somewhere safe. But do not become stone to survive stone. I read that line many times. Do not become stone to survive stone. And I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply picked up my coat, left my untouched birthday cake behind, and walked out knowing one terrifying thing. She had chosen that night because she thought I had nowhere else to go. Before I tell you what she said next and what happened after I walked out, tell me what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I had toured it 6 weeks earlier under an anonymous buyer profile, partly as an investment, partly as a dare to myself. The estate had been listed at $94 million. Then reduced to 87 after a failed foreign bid. I had negotiated hard, paid for inspections, and kept the deal hidden because I wanted one place in the world that had never belonged to my mother. The email said, funds verified. Seller will execute final transfer at 8:30 a.m. At 8:51, the deed was recorded. At 8:54, Ravenwick Island estate became mine. The attorney slid the final folder toward me and said, Congratulations, Miss Parker. For a second, the room became too quiet. I had heard my last name used as a warning, a brand, a burden, a weapon. Over the next few days, I learned the island's rhythms. The generator system needed upgrades. The old greenhouse had cracked glass. The lighthouse had not been used for tours in years. The cottages could become artist residencies, legal retreats, or maybe a summer program for women rebuilding after financial abuse. Margaret Whitmore Parker. Her handwriting was unmistakable. All sharp angles and perfect pressure, as if even paper should fear disappointing her. The first visit had been 15 years ago, 2 months after my father died. The second 8 years ago, around the time I was pushed out of the family's charitable foundation for not fitting the public image. The discovery made the room feel smaller. All those years, she had called my questions disrespectful. All those years she had said I was too suspicious, too cold, too independent. Maybe I had never been difficult. Maybe I had simply been standing too close to the truth. By midnight, Nora looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright.
Jenna, she said.
This is not just family misconduct. This is fraud. I looked toward the windows where the ocean slammed against the rocks below. For years, my mother had trained the family to see me as dramatic, unstable, ungrateful. My forensic accountant produced a clean paper trail for every dollar. My physician provided a statement confirming I was competent, healthy, and under no incapacity. A former business partner submitted a declaration describing me as methodical, risk-aware, and financially conservative to the point of irritation. That line made me laugh for the first time in days. Then we attached the one thing my mother did not know we had, the birthday dinner audio. Then Nora played the audio. My mother's voice filled the speakers. Sign it, Jenna. Tonight. Then get out. You came to the island 3 times because this was where part of the archive was hidden. You didn't kick me out because I embarrassed you. You kicked me out because you were running out of time. Her mask cracked. Not completely. That was the first official crack. The second came 3 days later when my mother's closest ally at the foundation agreed to cooperate. He gave investigators emails, invoice templates, and a message from my mother that read, Jenna must never gain independent access. She will ask questions her father should have taken to the grave. When Nora showed me that line, something inside me went quiet. My father had died in a boating accident. Her arrest did not happen like in movies. No dramatic screaming, no police dragging her down marble steps while cameras flashed. It happened quietly at 7:10 on a Tuesday morning when investigators served charges related to wire fraud, falsified nonprofit records, and attempted unlawful control of estate assets. The footage later showed her wearing sunglasses, holding her coat closed at the throat, refusing to look at reporters. My brother took a plea deal for minor participation after admitting he had signed documents he never read. The society pages stopped calling her a philanthropist. The court documents called her defendant. I thought that would make me feel victorious every morning. It didn't. Some mornings, I still missed the mother I wished she had been. So, I turned Ravenwick into a place with open doors, careful boundaries, and records no one could secretly rewrite. I kept the birthday dress in a glass case in my office, not because I worship pain, but because I respect proof. Whenever someone asked why a woman would buy an 87 million island estate the morning after being kicked out by her own mother, I gave them the simple answer first, because I could. Then I gave them the real answer, because sometimes the door they throw you through becomes the border between the life they controlled and the life they can never touch again. And if you are listening to this while trapped at a table where everyone expects you to sign away your voice, remember this.